This is our 38th lesson on biblical hermeneutics. It seems somewhat long and drawn out, but there's so many aspects of hermeneutics that we need to cover to get a thorough treatment of it. So we will not finish it this semester. We'll finish it this fall, in the fall. We're looking at parallelism, and this is a form of poetry that the Jews had, the Hebrew language, and also this form of poetry was to some extent in the Greek language. So, but it's definitely a part of poetry, the poetry of the Hebrew language. When we consider parallelism, we consider the number of lines employed in parallelism. And it's like in a poem. In our poetry in English, we have rhyme and rhythm to it. Usually we have rhyme, but there's some other kinds of poetry, even in English, if you study poetry, English poetry. So Jack and Jill went up the hill. Jill and hill rhyme. Jack fell down and broke his crown down, and crown rhyme. So we have rhyme in it. But if you're going to take the Bible and you're going to translate it into other languages, it won't rhyme in those other languages. Not very likely to rhyme. Almost guarantee it will not rhyme. And so your rhyme will be lost. And so that kind of poetry would not work for the Bible. And God, I believe, superintended the Bible. He, through his providence, brought about the languages, the three languages in which the Bible is written, primarily Hebrew and Greek, with a little bit of Aramaic. But the poetry of these other languages, Greek and Hebrew, is such that it can be translated into other languages and not lose the effect. And again, it is my opinion, and it's just strictly an opinion, that God providentially brought about this kind of poetry so that it could be translated. But let's look at the nature of Hebrew poetry, and we'll be looking primarily at Hebrew poetry, but it does exist in the Greek language. Consider the number of lines employed, consider the two different kinds of parallelism. We'll be considering two. And third, in the following lesson, we'll consider other kinds of parallelism. So we'll consider two different kinds of parallelism in this lesson. And in the later lesson, we'll have some more kinds of parallelism. Parallelism is common in the scriptures. It's generally misunderstood by English-speaking readers in the scriptures, of the scriptures. And misinterpretation because they don't understand the poetry, the nature of the poetry. It's largely unknown to English-speaking students of the scriptures of parallelism that we find in the Hebrew scriptures. So we need to understand the parallelism, and it would enhance our understanding of the Old Testament scriptures. I believe even the New Testament scriptures as well. Parallelism is characterized by its rhythm rather than its rhyme. And of course, when you translate into other languages, the rhythm could still be there, but the rhyme would not necessarily be there. Probably wouldn't be there, in fact. A book which would be translated into hundreds of other languages would not retain its rhyme in or perhaps any of the other languages, but it would retain its rhythm. So again, it is my opinion, and I'm convinced that it's probably true, that God, through his providence, brought about these languages and the type of poetry that we have in the Hebrew, and also I believe in the Greek as well. The opinion that is providentially controlled by God, that's my opinion. And in order to retain the poetic nature of the passage when it was translated into other languages. This type of poetry is foreign to the English ear, but not to an ear of many other languages. Other languages have this kind of poetry. Parallelism is from parallismos, and it's from para, beside, and alaleo, to each each or the other of the same nature, another of the same nature. This was the nature of Hebrew songs. Josephus tells us this in Antiquities 2, 16:4, Antiquities 4, 8:44, and Antiquities 7, 12:3. These are sites of Josephus's books. And then Philo also on the life of Moses, here's the site for it. And what we have then is we have both Philo and Josephus giving us that this is the nature of their poetry. And they wrote in the first century about the time of our Lord. Now let's look at parallelism was common in the New Testament as well. And of course, Mary said in Luke 1:46, my soul does magnify the Lord, and my soul has rejoiced in God my Savior, for he hath looked upon the lowly estate of his handmaid, for behold, from henceforth all generations shall call me blessed. For he that is mighty hath done to me great things, and holy is his name, and his mercy is upon unto generation and generation, and on them that fear him. She was employing parallelism here, and Mary was, with this. I believe she was speaking by inspiration, and so she said, my soul does magnify the Lord. Look at it a minute. He hath showed strength, verse 51, strength with his arm. He hath scattered the proud in the imagination of their heart. He hath put down princes with their thrones, from their thrones, and hath exalted them of low degree. The hungry he hath filled with good things, and the rich he hath sent away empty. So, and he hath given help to Israel, his servant. They might remember mercy. And he spake unto our fathers toward Abraham and his seed forever. This is that nature, that poetry. As this study of parallelism develops, we will see more aspects of parallelism that are found in this passage. So we're not going to go into them right now. We're going to lay them out, and then you can go back and look and find them in this passage. So in Luke 1:46 through 55, these verses. We will lay these out, and you could go back and look at it later. We're going to look at the nature of parallelism according to the number of lines, and there are kinds of parallelism. The nature of Hebrew songs, possibly New Testament psalms as well. Additional notes. Let's make some additional notes. There are two lines, some Proverbs 1:10:1 and Mark 3:24 through 25, and Mark 2:21 through 22. That's called distich, and the di is two, distich, two lines. Right. Now let's look at it here. The Proverbs of Solomon, the wise son maketh a glad father, but a foolish son is heaviness to his mother. Now notice this is said in antithesis. These are opposites. The wise son and the foolish son are opposites. The glad father and the heaviness of the mother are opposites. So here the parents both are involved, both the father and the mother. The wise son makes a glad father. Foolish son is heaviness to his mother. And this is poetry. And so we see the contrast, the antithesis, the setting them in opposition to one another. The wise son is in opposition to the foolish son. The glad father is in opposition to the mother who has heaviness. Right? So that's poetry. Note that these thoughts are an antithesis. The wise son is the opposite of the foolish son. The glad father is the opposite of the heaviness of his mother. So they're opposites to each other. Now, we could say the wise son makes a glad mother, and the foolish son is heaviness to his father. That would still say almost the same thing. And so, but the way it's laid out here is the son makes a glad father and so forth. Now then we have the number of lines. We have tri-stitch. Tri means three lines. So we see our 3 lines. Whoso causes the upright to go astray in an evil way, that's your first line, he shall fall himself into his own pit. But the perfect shall inherit good. So here we have a contrast here. We have the first, second, and third lines. Whoso causeth the upright to go astray in an evil way, he shall fall into his own pit. Your second line, but the perfect shall inherit good. The second and third lines are set in antithesis. They're opposite to each other. Notice here, he shall fall into his own pit, but the perfect shall inherit good. Who shall fall into his own pit? The one who causes the upright to go astray. He shall fall into his own pit. But the perfect, that is the mature, shall inherit good. He won't fall into the pit, he'll inherit good. So falling into the pit is the opposite or antithesis of inheriting good. So he's going to inherit something bad. Some bad things are going to happen to him. And he falls into his own pit. So this is 3 lines, tri-stitch, Proverbs 28:10. We won't look at every single proverb. This would require a whole study in itself. Lay some foundation for you. Tetra is 4, and we have 4 lines. So let's look at our first, second, and third lines and fourth lines. Take away the dross from the silver. So when you're melting silver, or there's other elements in the silver that are a form of dross, they'll rise to the top like a scum on something. And there cometh forth a vessel for the refiner. You get the dross out, and you got a vessel for the refiner. You got the mature. Now then, take away the wicked from before the king, and his throne shall be established in righteousness. So now what we have here, the first, second, third, and fourth lines are the first and third are parallel, and the second and fourth are parallel. Look at the first and third. The dross represents the wicked, and the silver represents before the king. And there cometh forth a vessel from the refiner, his throne shall be established, second and fourth. So the vessel for the refiner is the throne being established in righteousness. And again, this is 4 lines, and the first and second, third and fourth lines laid out, and the first and third are parallel, second and fourth are parallel. Now this, we can see the beauty of it here. And this is what he's talking about. This is parallelism, Hebrew parallelism. Let's try another one. Penta stitch. Penta is 5 in Hebrew and Greek. So penta stitch is 5 lines. The first line is worry not thyself to be rich. That's your first line. The second line is cease from thine own wisdom. The third line is wilt thou set thine eyes upon that which is not. The fourth line is for riches certainly make themselves wings like an eagle. And then the fifth line is like an eagle that flieth toward heaven. All 5 lines relate to covetousness, and they fall in a sequence. You weary yourself to be rich, and you're following your own wisdom when you do that, not following the wisdom of God. Wilt thou set thine eyes on that which is not? The wealth can be quickly lost. So it can be lost. They make riches certainly make themselves wings. They can be stolen, they can be lost. We could have a situation where, like in the United States, our currency could become useless. It's happened to other countries. With our national debt being what it is, it's kind of frightful that it might happen again. So it's certainly riches make themselves wings. They fly away toward the heaven like the eagle. And so that you can lose it. Wealth can be gone quickly. 6 lines. And of course, that is covetousness. Now, there's 2 sins relating to money. There's the sin of being a lover of money, and there's the sin of covetousness. Now, they're not the same thing. Covetousness is when you sin in trying to get the wealth, to have more attitude, and you're going to commit sins to get the wealth. And the love of money is when you love it so much, you're an old miser with it. You're stingy. You won't use it for good. So you have you won't use it right. So one could be guilty of both sins. He could be covetous, he could sin in getting the money, and he could be stingy and old miser with it once he gets it. Next line is hexastich. It's Greek for sex. Deliver them that are carried away unto death, those that are ready to be slain, see that thou hold back. If thou sayest, behold, we knew not this, doth not he that weigheth the hearts consider it. He that keepeth thy soul, doth not he know it? He shall not be, and shall not he render to every man according to his work. So we have 6 lines here, hexastich. And we have here, if we look at this, let's notice here the first line is deliver them that are carried away unto death. All right? And those that are ready to be slain shall thou hold back. If thou sayest, behold, we know not this, doth not he that weigheth the hearts consider it, and he that keepeth the soul doth not he know it, shall not he render every man according to his work. So those that are carried away unto death are those that are letting their works be evil, not be good works, not be obedience to God. So we can see that, and you try to hold them back away from death. It's almost like it's like a crescendo here. Goes up. Hepastich, 7 lines. For by wise guidance thou shalt make thy war, and a multitude of counselors there is safety. Wisdom is too high for a fool. He openeth not his mouth in the gate. He that deviseth to do evil, men shall call him a mischief maker. Again, this is talking about someone who's wise versus someone who's a fool. And the wisdom here is too high for the fool. He openeth not his mouth in the gate. He can't, because in the gate, everyone's going to see how foolish he is when he sits in the gate of the city, around the wise men of the city. And he that deviseth to evil, men shall call him a mischief maker. Again, we have kinds of parallelism. We have synonymous parallelism where they're synonyms, antithic. Their antithesis are opposites, synthetical. So you have integral. So we need to explain all of these. Parabolic, spherical, chiasmic. This forms the letter chi, which looks like an English X. And there's a correspondence between the various lines, synonymous. The following lines are essentially synonymous repetitions of the first line. That's what synonymous is. So we'll describe each of these as we lay them out. So synonymous parallelism, we repeats, but with synonyms. And we have a number of these even in the New Testament here. Mark 3:24-25, and Matthew 7:7-8. Sermon on the Mount. Luke 6:27-28, Proverbs 11:25, and 16:32. Let's look at one right here. We have synonymous parallelism. This is identical. The liberal soul shall be made fat. Now, fatness is to be blessed. That's what it indicates in the Hebrew. It's not overweight necessarily. He that watereth shall be watered also himself. The one that is watereth is the liberal soul. And being made fat is being watered also himself. He's going to bless, he's going to be blessed. So the liberal soul is the same as the one that waters. The one that's made fat is the one that's watered also himself. Blessed. We have similar, we look at Mark 3, again, we're getting into the New Testament. But most people think of this as being the Hebrew Old Testament, but I believe it's found repeatedly in the New Testament, particularly in the Gospels. What I refer to the Gospel as the fourfold Gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. If a kingdom be divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. Okay, and in the second line, verse 25, if a house be divided against itself, that house shall not be able to stand. The kingdom and the house are the same. The kingdom is divided, the house is divided. Divided against itself, both of them are divided against themselves. The kingdom cannot stand, the house will not be able to stand. And of course, we see this. Satan cannot stand, his house will not stand. Antithesis. Second line is an antithesis of the first line. Again, we have Proverbs 10:16 and 12:5 and 18:14. Chapters 10 through 5 of 15 of Proverbs are mostly antithetic. So they're antithesis. They're set in opposites of one another. Most of the Proverbs are. Not all of them, but most of them are. 16:1 through 22:16 of Proverbs, only 33 out of the 191 are antithetic. So most of them are different kind of Proverbs, a different kind of parallelism. Let's look at some simple antithetic parallelism. We'll take a simple one first, Mark 8:32 and Proverbs 14:28 through 15:2. And he says here, he that is slow to anger is of great understanding, but is hasty of spirit exalteth folly. So now, a person who is slow to anger is the opposite of one who's hasty of spirit. So that's exactly their antithesis. And is that one who's slow to anger is of great understanding, but the opposite of great understanding is to exalt folly. So now we know what exalting folly is. It's the opposite of having great understanding. We know slow to anger, be hasty spirit is the opposite of slow to anger. He's quick to become angry, see, and he's hasty of spirit. So he's hot-headed. We call him hot-headed in English in the United States. Now then let's look at Proverbs 14:30, the next verse. We have several here. A tranquil heart is the life of the flesh, but envy is the rottenness of the bones. So right here, the tranquil heart is the opposite of envy. If I'm envious, I'm not tranquil. I'm not at ease with what I have. I'm envious of somebody else. So tranquil heart and envy, being envious, are opposites. Life of the flesh is the opposite of rottenness of the bones. And again, these are opposites of each other. I'm convinced that the person who's envious of other people, that probably his body puts out hormones that are damaging to his body, maybe even to his bones. But certainly in the figurative sense, it's harmful. It is harmful spiritually, and no doubt about that, but it's probably harmful physically. I mean, we know this. People take lie detector tests, and they'll get all kinds of changes in their physiology of their body. They'll sweat, and their blood pressure will go up, and other things will occur. Let's look at Proverbs 14:31. He that oppresseth the poor reproacheth his maker, but he that hath mercy on the needy honoreth him. One who oppressed the poor is one who, the opposite of one who has mercy on the needy. And we need to understand what mercy is and study it more fully. But when you see a need of someone and you seek to relieve that need and help them in their need, the maker is the one that he that oppresseth the poor reproacheth his maker, but he hath mercy on the needy, honoreth him. So the reproaching of your maker, that would be reproaching of God, is the opposite of honoring him. Because if you have mercy on the needy, then you honor God. But if you repress them, you reproach your maker. Because God told us not to do that. And we have compound antithetic parallelism, Isaiah 1:18 through 20. Come now, let us reason together, saith the Lord, saith Jehovah, saith Yahweh. Probably Yahweh is probably a better translation. Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they be red like crimson, they shall be as wool. Right here, reason together. Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. So your scarlet sins will be made white, clean. And though they be red like crimson, red and scarlet, red like crimson and scarlet are basically the same. They shall be as wool. And we see clean wool, wool that has been sheared, and it'll be washed and made clean. And it'll be cleaned up, and so it might be used in the making of cloth. So the wool and the snow are both white, generally speaking. And the red and crimson and scarlet, red like crimson and scarlet, are the same. If you be willing and obedient, you shall eat the good of the land. But if you refuse and rebel, this is compound now. So here one is willing and obedient, you're going to eat the good of the land. But if you refuse and rebel, so the person who's willing and obedient is the opposite. Now this second 19 and 20 is antithesis. See, the willing and obedient is the opposite of the one who refuses and rebels. So willing and obedient, the person who rebels is not obedient. And the one who's willing and obedient will eat the good of the land. The one who refuses to rebel, he shall be devoured with the sword. So eating the good of the land is the opposite of being devoured with the sword. And people could see this when enemy armies come in and devoured them. And of course, God protected Israel when she did what it was good. For the mouth of Jehovah has spoken it. So again, in verse 18, thus saith Jehovah. And then here, the mouth of Jehovah has spoken it. They're sandwiched in between the two. We have compound antithetic parallelism. Antithesis. This is in Matthew 7:17 through 18, the Sermon on the Mount. Even so, every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but the corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. So the good tree and the corrupt tree are opposites. The good fruit and the evil fruit are opposites. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Again, they're in antithesis to each other. The good tree is the opposite of the corrupt tree, and the evil fruit and the good fruit are opposites. Here we have the contrast of good and evil tree, what they can and cannot do. What they cannot do. Now, he's talking there about false prophets, of course, in the context. Parallelism is a characteristic of both Hebrew and Greek poetry, characterized by its rhythm rather than its rhyme. It's either with parallelism, we'll easily translate from Hebrew into other languages and not lose its rhythm. Okay, it's its rhyme. Well, rhyme would not easily translate into other languages. Rhythm will easily translate into other languages. Parallelism can be classified by the number of lines, bi-stitched, tetra-stitch, di-stitch, tri-stitch, tetra-stitch, pentastitch, hex-stitch, and heptastitch. And 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 lines. Be classified by the nature of the parallelism, synonymous. First line is repeated with synonyms. Antithic. The second line is the antithesis of the first line, the opposite. It's from two Greek words, anti and thesis, standing opposite on the other side, answering to it. There are other types of parallelism will be considered in the next lesson. Are there questions or comments?